He built an empire with iron discipline, zero tolerance, and no space for weakness. But one night, he walked into his billion-dollar office and found a fragile girl sleeping on his couch like she belonged there. She was broken, barefoot, and hiding something. He could have kicked her out, but instead, he did something no one saw coming, and that changed everything. Ryan Blake wasn't the kind of man who ever forgot anything. Not birthdays, not meetings, and certainly not a $4 million flash drive holding contracts that would finalize a merger between two of the largest companies in the country. But tonight, for the first time in 10 years, he slipped up. He was halfway to his private jet when he realized the drive was still on his office desk. Irritated, he turned his car around and headed back to his skyscraper downtown. The city was quiet, glowing orange under the streetlights, as if it too was holding its breath. When he stepped into the building, it was dead silent. The security team had already clocked out early, a detail he would deal with later. His Italian leather shoes echoed on the marble floors as he walked briskly through the hallway toward his top-floor office. He swiped his card. The lights flickered on. Everything looked normal, until it didn't. Just as he passed his personal lounge, a space only he had access to, he heard it at a sound, soft breathing, a shift of movement, something human. He stopped cold. No one should be in there. His hand reached for the door handle. He pushed it open slowly, and then time stood still. There, curled up on the edge of the luxurious black leather couch, was a girl. A teenager, maybe 17, maybe younger. She was sleeping deeply, knees tucked into her chest, arms wrapped tightly around a faded gray backpack. Her clothes were dusty, torn at the seams. Her feet were bare. Her face looked pale under the dim lighting. Not from sickness, but from exhaustion. A kind of exhaustion that came from more than just a long day. Ryan didn't speak. He just stared. It didn't make sense. How did she even get in? That room required 2 levels of clearance. Was she dangerous? An intruder? A threat? Then she moved. Her eyes opened slowly, first confused, then panicked. She sat up quickly, clutching her bag like it was the only thing she had left in the world. I'm sorry, she stammered, her voice hoarse. I didn't mean to break anything. I just needed somewhere safe to sleep. I'll leave right now. Please, don't call the police. Her words hit him harder than he expected. She wasn't defiant. She wasn't aggressive. She was scared, defensive, like someone who'd had to run before. Ryan's instincts warred inside him. The businessman in him screamed to call security, follow protocol, make her someone else's problem. But something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time, held him back. He studied her face. No makeup, hair messy but clean, eyes glassy with fear. But honest. He walked a little closer. She flinched. I didn't steal anything, she whispered again, gripping her backpack tighter. I swear. I didn't say you did, he replied, his voice calm but firm. There was a long pause. Then Ryan asked something she didn't expect. What's your name? The girl blinked. No one had asked her that in weeks. Elena, she whispered. Elena, he repeated softly. How did you get in here? She hesitated. The back elevator. The one under maintenance. It wasn't locked. Ryan made a mental note. Fix security. But he didn't say it out loud. Why this place? She looked down at her hands. It looked warm, and no one was around. I was just going to sleep a few hours and go before anyone noticed. Her honesty was disarming. Ryan could have responded with a dozen different things, but he only said one. You hungry? Her head jerked up. What? I asked if you're hungry. She looked at him like he was speaking another language. And then, As if she couldn't help it, she nodded. That was all he needed. He turned and walked out. "Come on," he said over his shoulder. Elena didn't move at first. She wasn't sure if it was a trap, but her stomach growled louder than her doubt. Slowly, she stood, still holding her bag, and followed the billionaire into the private kitchen down the hall. He opened the fridge and took out a tray of leftovers: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables. Stuff he usually never ate himself. He placed it in the microwave. The silence was thick. "I won't ask why you're out here alone," Ryan finally said. "But you should know. People don't usually walk away from trespassing in this building." Elena nodded, eyes low. "But I'm not most people," he added. When the microwave dinged, he set the hot plate in front of her. She didn't speak. She just looked at it like it was a dream. Then she picked up the fork and started eating. Slowly at first, then faster. But never messily. She had dignity even now. Ryan leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a billionaire. He felt like a man trying to figure out why fate had just placed a frightened, starving girl in the middle of his world. And he wasn't ready to let her go. Who was Elena really? And why was she all alone in the middle of the night? Ryan had questions, but the answers were going to hit him harder than he ever expected. Elena sat quietly at the edge of the kitchen island, finishing every last bite on the plate. Not a word, not a glance. She ate like someone who didn't know when the next meal would come, and didn't want to waste a second of this one. Ryan didn't speak either. He just watched. There were 1,000 questions on his mind, but for some reason, he didn't want to overwhelm her. Not yet. When she finally put the fork down, she whispered, "Thank you," and then she waited, like she expected the kindness to come with a price. Ryan shook his head slightly. "You don't have to be afraid of me." That made her smile, just barely. Everyone says that right before they prove otherwise. It hit him like a gut punch. "Where are your parents?" he asked. Her smile disappeared. She looked down at her fingers, which were picking nervously at a loose thread on her sleeve. "My mom passed away last year," she said. "My dad left when I was 6. I was living with my aunt, but she kicked me out when rent got hard. Said I was old enough to figure things out." Ryan's jaw clenched. He'd seen a lot of ruthless people in his life, but nothing cold ever made him angrier than someone abandoning a child. "How long have you been living on the street?" 3 months. "I try to stay out of trouble. Keep quiet. I don't steal. I just find places where I won't be seen." "You picked the wrong place tonight," Ryan said. "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry." But strangely, he didn't want her to leave. Not yet. This wasn't just a case of a runaway. There was something else in her voice. A sadness. A weight. Something he couldn't put into words. He looked at her again. So young and already carrying more pain than most adults he knew. "You can stay here tonight," he said suddenly. Her eyes snapped up. "What?" "1 night. Just so you don't have to sleep on the floor somewhere." She hesitated. "Why would you do that?" "I don't know," he replied honestly. "Maybe because I can." Elena thought she'd just stay 1 night and disappear. But fate and Ryan had a very different plan. The guest room hadn't been touched in years. It sat behind a door Ryan rarely noticed. A luxury space he had added during the renovation of his top-floor office suite. A bed with crisp white linen, a walk-in bathroom, soft lighting, and a quiet hum of city silence through double-paned glass. But no one had ever stayed in it. Until now. Ryan turned the handle, flipped on the lights, and looked inside as if he was seeing it for the first time. "It's not much," he said, stepping aside to let her in. Elena's small frame lingered in the doorway. She didn't move. Her eyes scanned the room slowly. The bed, the fluffy towel folded at the edge, the neatly placed water bottle on the nightstand. She didn't speak. "You can lock the door from the inside," he added, trying to ease the tension. Finally, she stepped in. Her shoes, or what was left of them, made no sound on the plush carpet. She set her worn-out backpack carefully at the foot of the bed. As if afraid touching anything too hard would make it vanish, she turned around. Her voice was low, unsure. "Why are you doing this?" Ryan blinked. "Doing what?" "This," she gestured toward the room. "Feeding me, letting me stay, talking to me like I'm not invisible." The way she said that word, invisible, punched a hole through his chest that he didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, thinking. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because someone should have done it for me a long time ago." Elena's expression didn't change, but her posture relaxed just slightly. She nodded, turned away, and gently closed the door. Click. He heard the lock slide into place. Ryan stood outside that door for a few moments longer than he meant to. His head was spinning. None of this made sense. Billion-dollar deals were waiting on his signature. He was scheduled to be on a flight to Hong Kong in the morning. His world ran on logic, power, and control. And yet, he had just given a stranger keys to a part of it. He made his way back to his office, but his mind stayed behind. He sat in the leather chair that had seen 1,000 high-stakes decisions, but tonight he couldn't focus. His laptop stayed shut. The contract he came back for was still untouched on his desk. All he could think about was the girl behind the guest room door. Who was she really? Was she telling the truth? How much had she already been through, and what had she left out? He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city skyline, glowing with life, money, and lies. He remembered being 16, sleeping in a basement that smelled like mold and broken promises, waking up to the sound of glass bottles smashing against the wall, a mother who never spoke up, a father who only knew how to yell and hit. Ryan had escaped that world with nothing but a backpack and a fire in his chest. He had clawed his way to the top. That no one had given him a room, or a meal, or kindness. And now, maybe that's why he couldn't send Elena back out into the dark. He poured himself a glass of water. His reflection in the window caught his eye. Cold, powerful, distant. But tonight, something looked different. That wall he built so carefully around himself, it had a crack in it now. And that crack had a name. Elena. Meanwhile, in the guest room, Elena sat on the edge of the bed without touching anything else. The towel, the water, the blanket, they all felt like luxury she didn't deserve. She wasn't used to softness. Her nights were usually filled with hard pavement, car alarms, or the threat of being kicked awake by someone yelling at her to move. Here, it was quiet, too quiet. She looked at herself in the mirror above the dresser. A tired, messy girl stared back. One who hadn't had a proper shower in days. One who used to smile but now only knew how to survive. She blinked back tears. "Don't cry," she whispered to herself. "You got one night. Don't ruin it." She picked up the towel and stepped into the bathroom. The warm water was a gift she didn't expect. As it poured over her skin, something in her chest began to unravel. She didn't cry, not yet, but she let herself breathe, really breathe, for the first time in weeks. Back in his office, Ryan checked his watch. It was almost 3 a.m. the next morning. The press would be waiting. Investors would call. His assistant would notice something was off. But for the first time in years, None of that felt urgent. That he looked again toward the hallway point one night. He reminded himself. That's all. And yet, something told him, deep in his gut, that Elena's story wasn't finished. Not in his building. Not in his life. Not yet. The sun was about to rise. But with it would come a choice. Let her go back to the streets, or let her into something far more dangerous. His world, the morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows like a soft golden whisper. For a man like Ryan Blake, mornings usually meant high-stakes meetings, sharp suits, and headlines waiting for his next move. But today was different. He hadn't slept. He sat on the edge of the couch in his office, still in the same clothes from the night before, fingers loosely wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. His mind wasn't on stocks, deals, or the tech empire he built with fire in his veins. It was on the girl in the guest room. Elena. A knock at the office door snapped him out of his thoughts. It was his assistant, Kara. Punctual, polished, and way too observant. Morning, Mr. Blake. The Tokyo investors have moved the call up to 8 a.m. Your driver's downstairs. And, she paused, squinting. Are you okay? He nodded slowly. I'm fine. Cancel the meeting. Kara blinked. Excuse me? Cancel it. Reschedule. Tell them I'm handling something personal. Her eyes widened slightly. Ryan Blake never canceled. Never? Is everything all right? She asked again, more carefully this time, but he nodded again. But the silence between them felt heavy. Also, he said, clearing his throat, I need breakfast for two. Sent up here. Something light. Fruit. Toast. Eggs. Oh, and send up another set of clean clothes. Female. Small size. Something comfortable. Now she looked really confused. But Kara was trained not to ask questions. And Ryan Blake was the kind of boss you didn't question. Right away, sir, she said, before disappearing as soon as she left. Ryan stood and walked quietly toward the hallway. He stopped in front of the guest room door, hesitated, then gave a gentle knock, and no answer. He knocked again. Elena! Still no sound. His heart skipped. Was she gone? Had she snuck out during the night? He turned the handle slowly, and to his relief, found her sitting on the edge of the bed, fully awake, fully dressed. Clean, but still guarded. She looked up at him, her hair damp from a shower, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. I thought you left, he said. I thought about it, she admitted. Why didn't you? She looked away. Because I didn't want last night to be a dream. Her voice cracked slightly. That was the first time she let any emotion slip through the wall she'd built. Ryan softened. I had breakfast sent up. You don't have to rush. I don't want to get in the way. You're not, he said quickly. You're not in the way, Elena. Actually, I was hoping we could talk. She looked hesitant but nodded. The two of them sat across from each other at the kitchen island again, just like the night before. Only now, there was sunlight spilling across the marble, and Elena didn't eat like it was her last meal. She ate slowly, cautiously, like maybe she could stay a little longer. Ryan took a sip of his coffee before breaking the silence. I don't usually do this. I figured, she said with a small smile. I'm not used to letting people in, especially not strangers. But there's something about you. Something that doesn't add up. Elena froze slightly. Her grip on the glass of juice tightened. I told you the truth. I believe you, he said. But I also believe there's more. Something you're not saying. A long pause. Then she whispered, There is. She didn't elaborate. And Ryan didn't push, not yet. Instead, he leaned back in his chair. I have a crazy idea. She looked up, curious. What if you stayed a little longer, he said. Not forever. Just until you figure out your next move. You'd have a safe place to sleep. Hot meals. Clean clothes. Her eyes widened. You'd let me stay here? In your office? He chuckled. No. I have a guest penthouse in the same building. No one uses it. It's private. Safe. She stared at him. Why? He met her gaze. Because I think you need someone in your corner. And because maybe I need someone to remind me what it means to care about something real. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away fast. I don't want charity, she whispered. This isn't charity, he said firmly. It's a choice. Yours. She didn't answer right away. But then, for the first time, she nodded. I'll stay. For now. Later that day, after Kara had dropped off the clothes and discreetly left, Elena stood alone in the new penthouse suite Ryan had arranged for her. It was elegant, spacious, but quiet. She looked out over the city skyline and whispered to herself, what am I getting into? Elena had accepted safety for the first time in months, but secrets don't stay buried for long, and hers was about to surface for the next few days. Elena felt like she was living someone else's life. Fresh clothes folded neatly on a chair, a warm bed that didn't come with cold pavement underneath, hot meals that didn't taste like survival, showers without coins, and a door she could lock, not to keep people out, but to finally feel safe within. Ryan didn't ask many questions. Not yet, he simply gave her space. Each morning, she woke to find breakfast already set out on a tray, with a handwritten note tucked beneath the plate. Good morning. Eat well today. RB. There was no demand, no pressure, just quiet support, and that, somehow, made her even more nervous. Because she knew this wasn't just kindness. This was building trust. And trust was dangerous. One afternoon, she wandered up to the rooftop of the building, the one spot that felt open enough to breathe. The city stretched out in all directions like a glass ocean. Somewhere below, people were chasing money, running from pain, and pretending they weren't broken. She knew that game too well. Elena sat on a bench, pulling her knees up to her chest, watching the sun sink lower behind the skyline. That's when Ryan found her. He didn't say anything at first, just sat beside her. Close, but not too close. After a few quiet minutes, he finally asked what had been pressing on his mind all week. Why did you really run away, Elena? She didn't move, didn't answer. I'm not trying to interrogate you, he added softly, but I can't help you if I don't understand what you're running from. I told you, my stepdad threw me out. Yeah, Ryan said gently. But that's not the whole story, is it? Elena's breath hitched. She looked down at her hands, trembling just slightly. I didn't just run away, she whispered. I disappeared. Ryan turned his head. What do you mean? I was supposed to testify, she said, voice barely audible, against someone important, someone dangerous. Now his posture shifted, slightly more alert, but still calm. Who? She swallowed hard. A city official. My mom worked for him as a cleaner. I walked in on something I wasn't supposed to see. Something awful. He paid her to stay quiet. But I couldn't stay quiet. Her eyes filled with tears. So I went to the police. I did the right thing. I thought, maybe that would change things. Maybe it would stop him. She paused. The memory was like poison in her throat. But the case got buried. Evidence went missing. People stopped calling back. And then I started getting followed. Threatening messages. One night, Someone tried to break into our apartment. My mom panicked. She told me to leave, said I'd only make things worse, that I was making powerful people angry. She let out a bitter laugh. So I packed a bag, took a bus, and I disappeared, because apparently, doing the right thing is dangerous now. Ryan's jaw tightened. He didn't speak, but something in his expression changed, like a storm gathering behind his eyes. You tried to expose someone powerful, he said slowly, and they tried to erase you. Elena nodded. They almost did. The wind picked up around them. The silence was sharp. Ryan stood. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "What? Where?" "Just trust me." Back inside, he led her not to the office, but to a hidden elevator behind a bookshelf wall. She'd never noticed it before. It opened with a scan of his fingerprint. The elevator took them 2 floors down, where the air was cooler and the hallway darker. They stepped into a sleek, high-tech room filled with screens, files, and secure servers. "What is this?" Elena asked, stepping carefully into the space. "My private research lab," Ryan replied. "Every deal, every threat, every person I ever do business with, I vet them here. Quietly. Thoroughly." He walked over to a console and brought up a blank screen. "Give me a name." Elena hesitated. "You'll get hurt." "I don't care." She looked at him for a long time, then finally said, "Martin Crowley." Ryan's fingers froze above the keyboard. He knew that name. A city commissioner, involved in dozens of shady infrastructure projects, politically protected, rich, dangerous, and now connected to her. As he typed, data began to flood the screen. Photos, contracts, redacted files. "I knew he was dirty," Ryan muttered. "But I didn't know it went this deep." Elena took a shaky breath. "You're not safe," Ryan said, turning to her. "Not until we bring him down the right way. And that's exactly what we're going to do." She looked at him with disbelief. "Why would you risk that for me?" "Because I don't want you to disappear again," he said simply. "Because someone finally stood up and they deserve to be protected." And just like that, something changed. In Ryan's world of power and silence, Elena's truth became the spark that could bring it all crumbling down. But sparks always attract attention, and danger was closer than either of them realized. They opened a door to the past, and now the enemy knew she was still alive that night. Elena couldn't sleep, not because she was uncomfortable. The bed in the guest penthouse felt like sleeping on clouds. The sheets were soft, the room warm, and the silence peaceful, but inside her everything was chaos. She had finally told someone the truth. After months of hiding, months of running, it had spilled out in front of Ryan like an open wound. And instead of walking away, he offered help. Protection. He believed her, but now someone else might know she was still alive. As she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Elena's thoughts spiraled. Had anyone seen her enter Ryan's building? Had her name pinged somewhere in a system? Had Martin Crowley's people found out she talked? She didn't want to drag Ryan into this. He had no idea how dangerous Crowley was. Across the city, in a dimly lit office filled with cigar smoke and hushed voices, Martin Crowley was watching a blurry security video on loop. The footage showed a girl stepping out of a taxi in front of a luxury skyscraper, her face partly hidden under a hoodie. "She's back in the city," said a man in a dark suit beside him. Crowley leaned back in his leather chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Where did she go?" The man flipped through a few stills. "Blake Tower. Ryan Blake's building." Crowley's grin vanished. Ryan Blake, that name was trouble. The billionaire tech CEO had influence, resources, and a tendency to not mind his business when he should. If he was protecting the girl, things could get complicated. Crowley crushed the cigar into a glass ashtray. "Send someone to watch that building," he said. "If she's in there, I want eyes on every exit." "And if we see her?" Crowley's eyes turned cold. "Then we make sure she never talks again." Back at Blake Tower, Ryan was already 3 steps ahead. He had pulled every file on Martin Crowley that existed and some that didn't. Offshore accounts, fake shell companies, and one very telling photo of him at a charity event with known criminals. He wasn't just corrupt. He was dangerous. Ryan sat alone in his office, the city lights flickering outside the window behind him. His phone buzzed out a message from Kara. Just a heads up, an unfamiliar car has been parked across the street for 3 hours. Tinted windows. No plates. Ryan's eyes narrowed. He tapped a button on his desk. One of the security camera feeds popped up on the monitor. There it was. A black SUV. Engine off. No movement. Ryan didn't believe in coincidences. The next morning, he walked into the penthouse to check on Elena. She was already awake, sitting on the floor by the window with a cup of tea in her hands. She looked up when she saw him. "You okay?" she asked softly. He nodded. "You need to see something." He handed her a photo, a printed frame from the security footage. The SUV, parked outside. Watching, her face drained of color. "They know," she whispered. Ryan sat beside her. "We have 2 options," he said. "We can move you somewhere they'll never find you. New identity. New city. I can make that happen." She looked down. "Quiet, and the second option?" "We fight back," Ryan said. "We gather real evidence. Leak what they buried. And bring Crowley down. Publicly. Permanently." Elena stared at him, heart pounding. "I'm tired of running," she whispered. He nodded once. "Then we go to war." Ryan had built tech that could take down entire corporations in a single week. He cracked encrypted servers for fun in his 20s. But this was personal. He called in a few trusted people. Old friends. Ghosts from his hacker days. People who didn't ask questions, just got results. They started digging, and what they found was darker than either of them expected. Photos of underage girls being blackmailed. Secret contracts signed with bribes. Threats covered up by judges who were paid to forget. Martin Crowley wasn't just corrupt. He was a predator. Elena's testimony, once considered hearsay, was now the missing puzzle piece that could make everything collapse. But they weren't the only ones watching. 2 floors down. In the parking garage beneath Blake Tower, a man sat in the front seat of a black SUV, phone to his ear. "She's still in the building," he said. "But now she's not alone." A voice on the other end asked, "What about Blake?" The man looked up at the camera in the corner of the garage. "We're going to need a better plan." Later that evening, as Ryan walked Elena back to her room, the atmosphere had shifted. There was still tension, still fear, but something else had begun to grow between them. Trust, respect, something fragile but real. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly as they stopped outside her door. "Because," Ryan said, "I know what it's like to have no one believe in you. And I know how much one person can change everything." She looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "You're not what I expected." He smiled. "Neither are you." As the door closed behind her, Ryan's phone buzzed again. Another message from Kara. "We just got pinged. Crowley knows she's here. They're planning something." Ryan stared at the screen. It had officially begun. The trap was set. But in a game of power and secrets, who would make the first move? The night felt too quiet. From the 40th floor of Blake Tower, the city below looked peaceful, headlights tracing lazy lines through the streets, sirens faint in the distance. Neon glowing soft against glass. But inside the building, the silence was heavy, tense, like a storm gathering right outside the door. Ryan stood in his private command room, eyes locked on the wall of surveillance. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "What? Where?" "Just trust me." Back inside, he led her not to the office, but to a hidden elevator behind a bookshelf wall. She'd never noticed it before. It opened with a scan of his fingerprint. The elevator took them 2 floors down, where the air was cooler and the hallway darker. They stepped into a sleek, high-tech room filled with screens, files, and secure servers. "What is this?" Elena asked, stepping carefully into the space. "My private research lab," Ryan replied. "Every deal, every threat, every person I ever do business with, I vet them here. Quietly. Thoroughly." He walked over to a console and brought up a blank screen. "Give me a name." Elena hesitated. "You'll get hurt." "I don't care." She looked at him. For a long time. Then finally said, "Martin Crowley." Ryan's fingers froze above the keyboard. He knew that name. A city commissioner. Involved in dozens of shady infrastructure projects. politically protected, rich, dangerous, and now connected to her. As he typed, data began to flood the screen. Photos, contracts, redacted files. I knew he was dirty, Ryan muttered. But I didn't know it went this deep. Elena took a shaky breath. You're not safe, Ryan said, turning to her. Not until we bring him down the right way. And that's exactly what we're going to do. She looked at him with disbelief. Why would you risk that for me? Because I don't want you to disappear again, he said simply. Because someone finally stood up and they deserve to be protected. And just like that, something changed. In Ryan's world of power and silence, Elena's truth became the spark that could bring it all crumbling down. But sparks always attract attention, and danger was closer than either of them realized. They opened a door to the past, and now the enemy knew she was still alive that night. Elena couldn't sleep, not because she was uncomfortable. The bed in the guest penthouse felt like sleeping on clouds. The sheets were soft, the room warm, and the silence peaceful, but inside her everything was chaos. She had finally told someone the truth. After months of hiding, months of running, it had spilled out in front of Ryan like an open wound. And instead of walking away, he offered help. Protection. He believed her, but now someone else might know she was still alive. As she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Elena's thoughts spiraled. Had anyone seen her enter Ryan's building? Had her name pinged somewhere in a system? Had Martin Crowley's people found out she talked? She didn't want to drag Ryan into this. He had no idea how dangerous Crowley was. Across the city, in a dim, the one where someone tried to break in. The one where she hid under a bed, praying not to breathe too loud. But this wasn't a motel. This was supposed to be safe. She grabbed the flashlight Ryan had left on the bedside table and moved to the closet. Inside, beneath a loose floor panel, was a security hatch he'd shown her, a hidden room with metal walls and its own air supply. Only if it gets really bad, he'd said. It was time. She climbed in, pulled the panel shut, and pressed her back against the cold metal wall, flashlight off, heart racing. Downstairs, Ryan moved fast. He wasn't just a CEO. Before all this, before the suits and stock markets, he was a coder, a systems genius, a kid who used to break into secure networks just to see if he could. Now, he was using all of it. He accessed the elevator override, reversed the magnetic field, and launched a counter-protocol that cut power to every button on the attacker's panel. They were stuck between floors. Then he called Kara, get the off-site team on standby. We're not waiting. I want Crowley exposed tonight. You sure? Kara asked. No, Ryan said. But if we wait any longer, someone's going to die. Inside the security hatch, Elena sat in silence. No light, no sound, just her breath and then a faint noise. Something scraping against the outside panel. Her muscles tensed. They found the suite. She gripped the handle of the emergency flare gun Ryan had stashed inside. Only one shot. For distraction, not attack. The scraping stopped. Then silence. Had they left? Or were they waiting? She waited, heart thudding like a drum in her ears. Then, a sudden explosion of noise. Something slammed against the door. A voice cursed. Another bang. They were trying to break in. She couldn't stay. With shaking fingers, she opened the emergency escape hatch, a tight, vertical tunnel that led to a lower floor's maintenance corridor. Ryan had shown it to her once. She climbed in, closed the panel, and started to crawl. Meanwhile, Ryan had dispatched security to sweep the upper floors. The two intruders had split up. One was headed toward the main server room. The other, he'd lost on the feeds. That meant Elena was at risk. Then his phone rang. Unlisted number. He answered. Martin Crowley's voice came through, smooth and venomous. You're poking around in places you don't belong, Blake. Ryan didn't flinch. You sent people to kill her. I sent people to clean up a mess, Crowley said coolly. You just happened to be standing in it. She's going to testify. I'm going to make sure of it. Crowley laughed. You think this ends with courtrooms and headlines? This ends with blood. Then the line went dead. Ryan stared at the phone. The war wasn't coming. It had already begun. Elena escaped the ambush. But the next move could break them both. Will Ryan strike first? Or will the past catch up too fast? Elena's hands were scraped. her knees bruised. But she kept crawling through the maintenance shaft, heart pounding like it was about to explode out of her chest. The air was tight, dust choking her lungs, but she didn't stop, not after what she heard outside the hatch, not after the voices. They were inside the penthouse. She didn't know how much time she had, maybe seconds, maybe minutes. But Ryan had said this shaft would connect to a service corridor on the 35th floor. If she could just get there, maybe she could make it to the panic room. At that same moment, Ryan was moving like a man on fire. He was in a private elevator, descending to intercept Elena. Security had one of the intruders pinned in the tech floor, but the second one had vanished from the surveillance grid, disabled the hallway cameras, slipped into a blind spot. He was hunting, and Ryan knew exactly who he was after. He pressed his earpiece tighter. "Kara, where's the backup team?" "5 minutes out," she said. "Too slow," he muttered. "I'm going in." Elena finally reached the panel Ryan had shown her. She pushed it open with all her strength, tumbling out onto the hard concrete of the 35th floor maintenance hallway. Her body ached. She staggered to her feet, gasping for air. Then she heard it. Footsteps. She froze. Someone was coming down the hall, fast. She backed up, then ducked into a side room and slammed the door behind her, holding her breath. The footsteps stopped right outside. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then bang. The door rattled in its frame. She stumbled back, searching the dark room with her hands. Her fingers hit metal, a janitor's cart with tools scattered on top. She grabbed a wrench and backed into the shadows. Another bang. This time, the door cracked slightly. Whoever was outside wasn't giving up. Ryan's elevator stopped on the 36th floor. He sprinted into the corridor, gun drawn, a sleek black Glock. He hated weapons, but tonight wasn't about preference. It was about survival. He rounded a corner and saw the shattered camera wiring cut with a precision knife. Then he heard the crashing point, 1 floor down. He ran. The third slam shattered the door. Wood splinters flew into the dark as the man stepped inside, tall, masked, methodical. A silenced weapon in one hand. He didn't speak, just scanned the room, slow and steady. Elena crouched behind the shelving unit, holding her breath, every muscle locked. He was feet away. He took another step, clicked. A loose screw under his boot. His head turned, just slightly, and she didn't wait. Elena lunged from the shadows and swung the wrench with everything she had. It connected with his wrist. The gun hit the floor. He snarled and grabbed her arm, but she twisted out, kicked him in the knee, and scrambled for the gun. Too late. He recovered fast. His fist slammed into her shoulder, knocking her sideways into the metal shelves. Everything crashed, cans, bottles, tools. She screamed, then bang. A gunshot echoed through the hall. The man staggered backward. Ryan stood in the doorway, smoking gun in hand. "Get away from her." The man raised his hands slowly, then smiled under the mask. "Too late, Blake," he said. "He knows everything." Then he turned and sprinted out the opposite exit. Ryan rushed to Elena. "Are you okay?" She nodded, shaking. I think so." He helped her up, arm around her as they stumbled down the hallway. Every part of her hurt. But she was alive. They reached the safe room minutes later. Steel doors. Biometric locks. Reinforced walls. Ryan sealed them inside and activated the signal jammer. No devices in, no signals out. Just them, and a table full of evidence. Everything they collected, voice recordings, emails, financial records, blackmail contracts, photos. It was all there. "You still want to do this?" Ryan asked quietly. Elena looked down at her scraped hands, her bruised arms, the pain in her chest. Then she looked up. "Yes." Ryan nodded. "Then we make it count." At sunrise, the plan went live. Kara released the files across encrypted news channels, whistleblower forums, and legal watchdogs. Government agencies received anonymous tips. Journalists began swarming Blake Tower within hours, and Elena, she recorded a message, face visible, voice steady. "I'm Elena Hayes. I was part of something horrible, not by choice, but by silence. I saw girls threatened, bribed, hurt, all under Martin Crowley's name. And I refused to stay quiet. The video went viral. Within 24 hours, the internet exploded. Billionaire tied to human trafficking ring. Whistleblower claims murder plot to silence her. Tech CEO shelters key witness. Is this the end of Crowley? Crowley was cornered, and for the first time, he looked afraid, but men like him don't go down without a fight. That night, a black SUV pulled up outside Blake Tower again. This time, no masks. No silence, and no intention of leaving empty-handed. The truth is out. But Crowley has one final card to play. Will justice win, or will everything come crashing down? The tower felt too quiet. Ryan stood by the bulletproof glass windows of the 40th floor, watching the early morning haze roll over the city skyline. Below, a crowd had formed: news vans, protesters, and police barricades. Flashbulbs exploded every few seconds. Helicopters buzzed overhead. The truth was out. The files were public. Elena's video had reached over 12 million views in just one night. Her name was trending. Martin Crowley's empire was collapsing like a house of cards, stock prices plummeting, sponsors pulling out, board members resigning by the hour. But Ryan wasn't celebrating. He knew better. Cornered predators don't surrender. They bite. Elena sat on the couch, pale but composed. Her left arm was bandaged, and a fading bruise marked her jaw. But her eyes, those firelit eyes, looked stronger than ever. You think he'll come himself? She asked quietly. Ryan turned, meeting her gaze. Yes. Then we need to be ready. He nodded. We are. He pulled a small black box from his coat pocket and placed it gently on the table. Inside, a USB drive. The last copy of the original, unedited footage, the one that showed not just Crowley, but the people above him, senators, CEOs, royalty, the kind of people who didn't just vanish, they erased. Elena stared at it. This is the real reason he's coming, isn't it? Ryan said nothing. He didn't need to. At 9:07 a.m., the building's security grid flickered. A single panel in the basement triggered a fail-safe. An elevator activated. But no one called it. 5 men stepped out of the parking garage elevator dressed in sleek black suits. No words. No weapons visible. Just calm, ruthless purpose. At their center, Martin Crowley, flawless as ever. Dark gray coat, gold cufflinks, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He stepped over the red carpet of the lobby like a king returning to his castle. No guards challenged him. They'd been bought. Or silenced. Kara's voice crackled through Ryan's earpiece. He's in the building. I know, Ryan replied. Take the external team to the rooftop and wait for my signal. No one leaves this building until I say so. You sure you don't want backup now? Ryan's jaw tightened. This ends face to face. Crowley rode the elevator to the 40th floor alone. Not a flicker of fear on his face. He stepped into the lounge like it was his home. Elena stood, silent. Ryan was already there, calm, unreadable. I've got to hand it to you, Blake, Crowley said, looking around. For a man who used to avoid conflict, you sure know how to create it. Ryan didn't answer. Crowley turned to Elena. And you? You always had fight. That's why I liked you. Elena didn't flinch. That's why I'll destroy you. Crowley laughed softly. You think the world cares? You think headlines last? They'll eat the story up for a week. Maybe 2. Then they'll move on. But me? I don't go away. He leaned in slightly. I rebuild. I always do. Ryan stepped between them. You won't rebuild from prison. Crowley's smile vanished. Then his hand moved, quick, subtle, to his pocket, but Ryan was faster. Clicked. A gun. Aimed directly at his chest. Crowley froze. You won't walk out of here, Ryan said, voice low. You've already lost. That video you're after? It's live. Encrypted. Scheduled to be sent globally the moment I don't enter a code every hour. Crowley's face changed. Not anger, panic. You're bluffing. Ryan reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. Tapped a button. Suddenly, the giant screens on the wall behind him flickered to life, showing security feeds from over a dozen global newsrooms. Editors sitting with headphones, fingers poised over keyboards. The moment I die, Ryan said coldly, so do your secrets. Silence stretched across the room like a wire. Then Crowley laughed. low. Dark. Dangerous. You're willing to die for her? He asked. I'm willing to end this. Ryan's finger hovered near the phone again. I press this and you don't just lose your company. You lose your entire network. The offshore accounts. The safe houses. Your buyers. Crowley's mask cracked, fury flickering behind his eyes. I made you rich. I was already rich, Ryan said. You just reminded me how worthless that is without integrity. For the first time, Crowley looked small, not powerful. Not in control, just exposed. You'll regret this, he whispered. I hope I do, Ryan said. It'll mean you're behind bars. Crowley moved fast, lunging toward the USB drive on the table, but this time it was Elena who stopped him. She slammed a paperweight into his hand, knocking it sideways. He stumbled, swearing. Ryan grabbed him, twisted his arms behind his back, and pinned him to the floor. Kara, he said into his earpiece. Send in the team. 3 minutes later, federal agents stormed the building. Crowley was arrested on the 40th floor, charged with conspiracy, racketeering, trafficking, and attempted murder. He never said another word, but his expression, humiliated, livid, would haunt tabloids for weeks. The arrest video was replayed over and over. Justice was finally visible. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The victims Crowley once silenced began speaking out, inspired by Elena. Lawsuits were filed. Political allies distanced themselves, and Ryan, he stepped away from the company, donated most of his fortune to survivors' foundations. When asked why at a press conference, he simply said, because wealth without purpose is just a prettier prison. As for Elena, she chose a different path. She didn't disappear into luxury. She started a nonprofit. She walked back into the world that once broke her, not as a victim, but as a warrior. Every time a girl called for help, someone answered now. Because of her, the battle may be over, but the war for justice never ends. If the story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life tales of strength, redemption, and the fight for what's right. Turn on notifications bell because the next story might be yours.